بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمد ونصلي على رسول الكريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask him to send peace and blessing on our Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. These, as I announced last week, this topic, the book that we're doing is called Al-Eti'dal by Hadhrat Shaykh Mawlana Zakariyya Rahimahullah, great alim from the subcontinent. Someone, my father Rahimahullah, when he studied in the 60s in Islamiyya, Medina University, Islamic University, then he used to visit every Jum'ah and benefit from him. So he, Rahimahullah, wrote a book called Al-Eti'dal, and in Urdu it's translated Islamic siyasat, Islamic politics. And the middle way, I'tidal is to have I'tidal to be fair, just, and to be balanced, and to take the middle way. So he's known to the ulama and non-ulama alike, one of the great muhaddithin of the later 20th century, Rahimahullah. The book that he wrote, there's a case study. The background to this book is a letter somebody wrote in which he basically this is related to the partition of the subcontinent. Basically, Pakistan being carved out of India as a Muslim country, or India being split into two countries, India and Pakistan, to create a Muslim majority state. So what happened was the Muslims and the ulama fell into two camps, even though they're from the same madrasa, and it caused great division among the Muslims. And so Mawlana Zakariyya Rahimahullah is addressing somebody writing a letter, and there's certain issues are mentioned in the letter. He answers it in this 160-page booklet, you can say, because the issue is complicated, and you have to have all this other background information around it, all these things around it to understand and deal with it properly. Because you're really talking about the whole, when divisions happen at that level, and you're talking about a country being carved out, it's not a simple thing. It's not so straightforward. So of course the ulama fell into sort of two big personalities on the camp, the split where it occurs, and the two great ulama, great ahlullah, pious people. One side is the Madani group, Mawlana, called the Madani group because Mawlana Hussain Ahmad Madani Rahmatullah, Shaykhul-Islam, he's one of the most senior ulama, and he went to jail in Malta by the English and jailed repeatedly by the British and so forth. Great sacrifices done in the political field, getting rid of the foreign occupying the colonialists. So he, Rahimahullah, felt he was in that side. He was in the camp of with Congress, basically that we will, Muslims should remain within a greater India. And you have to understand how big the problem is, how big the problem is actually, because you're talking about even now a third to maybe not half, maybe between a third and a half of the world's Muslim live at that time. Now if you add up all those countries of that region that are ruled by the British, were basically one government, is basically almost a third to half the ummah. And it's still, if you look at the numbers, you add up all the Muslims in that region, it's about a third to half of the Muslims. If you go right up to Afghanistan and Nepal and Burma and all these things, Sri Lanka, all these places were ruled by the British at some point. So Muslim fell in this one area, and hundreds of millions of Muslims you're talking about. You're not talking about a few thousand, or like in Australia now we have like 500,000 or so Muslims. There's a lot of, and with 1,000 years of history behind them, political history and rulership and so forth. So this is the backdrop. And Mawlana Shaykh Tanwi Hakimul Ummah, Mawlana Shaykh Tanwi Rahmatullah, he's from the camp of that, no, we need to carve out a separate Muslim identity, a separate state called Pakistan, which became Pakistan. And that's what happened in the end. That side, you could say, in a way, hindsight is 2020. We can argue the pros and cons and who's successful, not successful, but ma qaddara Allah sha, whatever Allah will happen. This is the back. So this is the case study, you can put it. But what happened was the difference became so severe, not between necessarily those two pious individuals, those great ulama here, that political or academic difference. It's when everybody else got involved. And you know how our people are, being Pakistani, so politics, like the drama started, and the insults started, ridicule started, and these big ulama were insulted in public, and not just insulted, worse things were said and done against them. So the difference took on a very extreme shape form in terms of insults being thrown and derision and so forth. So someone wrote a letter, and in the letter asked that clarification on 7 points. One of the students of Mawlana Zakariyya Rahimahullah. So these 7 points, and I'll try to cover each one of them over the next 7 weeks. But the reason why, although this is a historical case, but there are many advices in here, lessons. When Muslims have difference of opinion, when there's problems within masjids, within committees, within organizations, within schools, within Islamic peak or body organization, how do you actually deal with them? and what are the limits that you should operate within. Right? Like people cross whether you're dealing with a nation state as big as India at that time, or you're dealing with a smaller, like dealing with a few brothers. What are the parameters that so there's politics, you're making policies and rules and so forth in organizations, but how you should operate, what's your, the method that you should adopt, and what are the limits of politicking, what are the limits of how you should engage, and there are rules. Sharia has given us detailed rules on how to behave with each other. The politics the ends don't justify the means. I mean, that's a basic rule in Deen. So the first point was, although Mawlana Thanwi and Mawlana Madani are both saintly personalities and high character, how is that between them there exists such a deep difference in political thought? How can there be such deep differences between the saints of Allah? This question was asked. The awliya, how can the awliya, these mashaykh, these buzurgs, how can they have a difference of opinion? That's the first. Who in your opinion is the right path, and with whose views do you find yourself in agreement? So asking the shaykh himself. And what should we do? Number 3, why is it that you do not side with any of the parties? 4, today the Muslims are being crushed, overwhelmed and destroyed. I think that's like a permanent situation we're in for the last 100 years. What should they do? Selfish personal matters play a great role in people's actions and intentions. And it seems as if everyone is following his own desires. It seems. If the 6th point, we see that the dignity of the ulama is purposely being destroyed, and on every front we hear them being criticized and abused. And the last point, through the difference of the ulama, the ummah is suffering a great loss. So these are the points he wants clarification on. So then he starts, and I'll read it to you. So the first point, how is it these two great personalities can differ? I'll read it and we'll discuss some points. Let it be known that it is not unheard of to find differences of opinion among the true and sincere saintly ones. Buzur, pious people, mashayikh, awliya, they can differ. They can both be awliya and they can differ. There have always been such differences and there always will be. However, there is no need for anyone who has acquired Islamic knowledge to be surprised the fact that ulama can differ. He says in madrasa we teach from Shawwal to Shaban, we teach 10 months a year. Every day, nearly 20 times in the class, we say this imam says on this imam says that. This is like for ulama, especially the final year of the alim studies, the whole 20 times a day the shaykh who's teaching the hadith, in Dawra hadith, will say this statement. So and so says this, so and so said this, so and so did this. On every hadith, on every masala, in every bab. If we held the opinion that disagreement is a sign of lack of ikhlas, lack of sincerity, it would cause us great anxiety and confusion. Because they have differences doesn't mean they don't have ikhlas. Like this one has ikhlas, this one doesn't have this one has ikhlas, this has no ikhlas, because they're different. This is not a sign that they either of one of them lacks ikhlas. And that means that that these people, if they have differences, they're not from the awliya, they're not from the ulama, because they have ikhtilaf, disagreement. As for the disagreement being of tremendous depth, I say that I do not consider differences to be strong at all. All I can say is that the present political situation causes temporary disagreement. One person's view is that joining the Muslim League, which is pro-Pakistan obviously, is beneficial for the Muslim Ummah, and that to join the Indian National Congress is to the disadvantage. The other person has the opposite view, because I don't consider this to be a big Mawlana Zakariyya saying Rahimahullah, I don't consider this to be a big difference. Now it is a duty. He starts giving advice how to deal with this. That now it is the duty of every man and of sound opinion, who looks at the present situation and understands it, while bearing in mind the tenets of the Sharia, to choose the path of that person whom he honestly and sincerely considers to be following the better path. As for him who is not well versed in these matters, the non-ulama, he should stay in the presence of those persons for a couple of days. Therefore, after whoever of these two he feels himself drawn to most strongly, he should follow. If you don't have the Sharia training to discern about all the issues, then go stay in the company, and where you feel comfortable, okay, this is the one, stay with both of them or in the company of their followers until you feel, okay, I'm content with this, and follow. But there is definitely no need for any fighting or arguments. Then finally he says, Sahaba radiallahu anhum differed. The battle of the camel, Jamal, the famous battle that happened between Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. In the other side, one side is Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, the Prophet's son-in-law, Sayyidina Hussein, Hassan radiallahu anhu's father, Sayyidina Fatima radiallahu anhu, the son-in-law. Rasulullah gave his daughter, beloved daughter to him. Babul Ilm, the fourth Khalifa. On the others, it's called the battle of the camel. Why? Because Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anhu, the camel came on the other side. in the side of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. She came, her camel was on the other side. Is this difference bigger than that? And Allah made it such a symbol, the battle of the camel, right? The incident of the camel, or the battle of the camel. People died, Muslims died, they fought each other. Sahaba radiallahu anhu came on both sides. But eventually it was fixed. Eventually it was rectified. It took Hassan radiallahu anhu, the Prophet's grandson, to reconcile. But he said, is this situation worse than that, more difficult than that? No, it's not. And you cannot say this one is, we say for Ali radiallahu anhu, we say for Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha. May Allah be pleased with both of them. They're both, this is the most beloved wife of Rasulullah, this is a son-in-law of Rasulullah. It happened, it's a historical fact. But it tells you something, that the difference can reach at that level, but it can also be reconciled. So then he gives the first sort of advice in terms of being careful, the Sharia detailed guidelines, and this is what we'll go through. First one is that Rasulullah, he quotes the hadith, whoever among you do you consider to be bankrupt? Rasulullah asked. They replied, he who has no possessions, he has no mal, he has no wealth. Rasulullah said no, that is not so. The real bankrupt is the one who will appear before Allah on the day of judgment with righteous deeds, but he did not act. He had acted unjustly to this one, had sworn at somebody, degraded somebody, usurped the possessions of another. On that day, money will be of no avail, of no benefit. Those whom he treated unjustly will be given his good deeds. He backbited people, he swore at people, insulted people. They will take his a'mal, in those people that rights that he's taken. For this reason, their evil deeds will be cast upon, and then when all his good deeds are finished, he doesn't have any good deeds to give, then they'll start throwing the sins. Imagine, a'mal you've done that is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you did with ikhlas, quality a'mal. That's amal. Amal is done with ikhlas, with concentration. Now other people are taking it on the day of judgment. And then the people went and did sins to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Someone did zina, na'uzubillah, someone did some other sin, stole. That person is coming out throwing that sin that he did in this dunya. So he's saying, this is the first advisor, like you can't, these lines cannot be crossed despite your differences. You can't backbite, you can't swear, you can't abuse, you can't attack the reputation of a person, you can't degrade anybody, you can't take the position, you can't usurp. Despite your differences, you can't cross these lines. This is the first thing that the Shaykh starts. And he said, and then he gives another point, that if a person, if for argument's sake, the fault or misjudgment has been made on one side, does it necessarily mean that one should close one's eyes to all the person's fine qualities? If a person, he does something wrong, then what about all the good things that he's done? So you're going to close your eyes to all the good that he's done, all the other good things they've done, because of one mistake that they've done. So our noble Sharia has taught us every minor detail in our lives, for our lives and our deen. But it seems that we, in spite of claiming to be followers of the deen, pay no attention to it, especially when it comes to differences. When problems happen, how people behave. Sharia goes out the window. Others follow our principles and prosper, while we are busy discarding our great treasure and suffering great losses. The kuffar, they deal with their differences better. You watch them how they deal with their political differences, how we deal with it. And look at our country, because we left our deen. They're following our rules. Not to praise them, but they're following our deen, teaches us how to deal with differences. They deal with it in a more civilized way than we deal with it. They're not doing it as an act of ibadah, they're doing it as a matter of principle, because for the collective good. So of course they're going to win. Of course they're going to win, and we're going to be slaves. You know, the Muslim countries are going to be slaves. And they're going to act like slaves, because we're not even following. Yesterday I was reading the history of black slavery in Africa, like in the Arab slave trade, the African on African slave trade, hundreds of years. This thing is like not, you can't just erase it, we forget about it, we did nothing. In Libya they're selling now slaves, there's slave markets now in Libya, there's videos online. Well, this is not out of jihad. The Arabs, when they're taking slaves, they're selling them, the Ottomans and Persians, they were selling slaves to them for hundreds of years. It's not out of jihad. They'll go in there, like one qawm was there, they're like harvested like cattle. And then they were taken to the Muslim, the sold throughout the Muslim. This is a part of our history, unfortunately. So there's a reason why the colonialists didn't come out of thin air. They didn't come out of thin air. We deserved. People can. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lifted His help? how much zulm you have to do. You do a zulm on a whole continent, Allahu Alam. Anyway, so we don't even follow our own rules. So this way, until we follow our own rules, we're expecting Allah, and if others follow it, Allah's going to help them. That's a reality. My teacher, he taught us a hadith in Bukhari Sharif when Rasulullah ﷺ, he came down from the mountain after he told Sayyidina Khadija radiallahu anha, cover me, wrap me up. He said, Allah will not waste you. Take care of the wayfarer, you take care of the orphan, you take care of the poor, the destitute. She didn't mention any of his ibadah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. She mentioned, my teacher said that if a kafir does these things and a Muslim doesn't do it, Allah, in this world, Allah will help the kafir against a Muslim. If you come in conflict, because why? His behavior is better. It's not that kufr is better. Na'udhu billah. But if there's something right, you have to say, yeah, that's right. He behaved like he did the right thing. So listen to me. I accept for a moment that from one of the sides, there's an issue and one of the sides is wrong, which may be even open and clear error, which you find yourself unable to accept. Well, do not accept. Who's forcing it down your throat? But is this respect? I should be very much like to remember the words of Muaz bin Jabal radiallahu anhu. What a wonderful principle he explained as he addressed one of his students, one of Sahaba radiallahu anhu. I warn you against the error of the wise ones. For sometimes shaitan utters through the tongue of the wise one a word of error, and a hypocrite, a munafiq, speaks a word of truth. The student asks, may Allah have mercy on you. If such is the case, how will I know when a wise one occasionally speaks a word of error and a hypocrite a word of truth? How will I know what is false and what is truth? Muaz radiallahu anhu said, be careful of such statements about which is being said. What kind of statement is this? How can he have said this? Usually when a person, this is the way you identify, because the well-trodden path in deen, what is well and known, what is established, this is halal, this is haram, this is makruh, this is mustahab, what is right, what is wrong has already been established in the deen. So when somebody comes along, even if he's a good person, he says, what statement is this? What kind of tafsir is this? Never heard this before. And you check the tafsir, the established tafsir and so forth. This is a strange tafsir. How can he have said this? When that question comes to your mind, it sounds like a bit off. Alright? Do not follow such words to turn you away from the wise man. It is quite possible that he may have retracted that statement from us. He might have retracted from the statement. Then you may find the truth when you hear it. For the truth has light, the truth has light in it. Now let us ponder over the important points mentioned by Sayyidina Muaz radiallahu anhu. In the first place, when he tells us not everyone speaking a word of truth is necessarily a wise man, a hypocrite also does that. This shows just because one has heard a word of truth from anyone, one should not become the ardent follower of this person, because that person may be a munafiq. He speaks the truth. Even Trump speaks the truth. We surprised. All right, he's saying he says some strange thing. But then you want to look at the rest of his life. Say, all right, better not become his follower. But sometimes, the most craziest person even speaks truth. We people have a habit of becoming ardent fans of such people after some time, merely having heard one speech by him, or having merely read one article by him. Then on the basis of that single speech article, we tend to praise him to high heaven. And worse than that, sometimes we're aware of the fact that a certain person is irreligious and acting in a sinful manner. Yet because he utters such words which are in agreement with our desires, we try to prove him to be deeply religious personality of saintly nature. So much so that, Allah forbid, we bring him to even near prophethood. If occasion comes along when he says something in disagreement with our wishes, we bury him down below. The result is that about the very same person will say, shout Zindabad, long live, and brave, and long he may live. The next day we shout Murdabad, may he die. We curse him, dead to you. Is this not similar to the case of waking up as a believer and going to bed at night as an unbeliever, as mentioned in the hadith? The second point regarding Sayyidina Muaz radiallahu anhu's statement is that it is possible that a wise man may sometimes utter a word which may be in error and lead astray. Hence, after merely having heard a person one or two times, one should not become an ardent adherent. What is needed is that actual facts and circumstances should be ascertained, pondered over and considered. If in the majority of affairs he is found to be a follower of the Sharia and a sincere follower of the Sunnah, then undoubtedly he may be accepted as a guide. That in what? In a majority of the affairs. Because we're not, in this time and age, nobody is ma'soom, especially in this. I mean, nobody is ma'soom after the Anbiya, and other than Anbiya alayhim salam, no one is ma'soom, right, from human beings. But in this time and age, I mean, we should be worried about our own faults. Then after full investigation, some derogatory thing or unacceptable statement is attributed to him, it should not be accepted. In such a case, do not become separated from him. It is quite possible that having held that view, he may retract and recant. He might change his view as well. He might realize, because the majority of the things that he does is good. If a person does majority of the thing, someone like an alim or a political leader or somebody, that majority of his statements are good. That means the majority is a good Muslim. Therefore, if he's made a mistake, then that goodness should eventually lead him to leave that wrong thing. This in short in what Sayyidina Mu'az radiallahu anhu said. There is much scope for meditation in his statement. Now let us look at our present situation, judge. What do we generally do? We have some thoughts in our mind which may be quite insignificant and minor detail, which we hear when we hear anyone speaking and uttering something which agrees with our preconceived idea, we start to heap praise on the speaker, offer our complete support and assistance, and are even prepared to consider any serious act of which are against the Sharia to be insignificant. This is indeed injustice. It should have been such that the good points be praised and the evil deeds to be condemned, or at the very least, silence should be expressed at his evil. But here, even his evil is being considered to be minor importance and even justified. At times, it goes so far that the rules of Sharia which it transgresses are being looked upon as being nonsensical and absurd. That is not all. We find that even regarding salat, which is one of the major pillars of our deen, and which has in numerous hadiths been mentioned to be the distinction between faith and disbelief, such words are being said and written that to repeat them here fills me with revulsion and anguish. Just because our hero does not perform salat, salat becomes jeered and scoffed at. People made fun of salat because their leader doesn't pray salat. And a mockery is made of it. Then on the other hand, if we find anyone mentioning anything else against our ideas and wishes, we go so far as to consider every action as being blameworthy. Like, we don't look at the actions of a person. We look at that person, he made this mistake, everything he does is wrong. Even the outstanding saintly qualities become degraded in our eyes. Even the good things he does now has become wrong. The Sharia and sound logic, the Sharia, because everything is guided by the Sharia, this wahi, and sound logic demand that everything should be put in its own rank and category, from where it should be neither become unduly elevated nor relegated. Things should not be put up. Everything has a place. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, anzilun nasa manazilum, keep people in their proper ranks of respect. Like, if there's an alim or a mufti, someone senior, then it is actually his right in Islam to actually be respected. Yeah, if he's telling you to don't pray, you don't have to pray, it's not fard to pray, don't have to give zakat, you start going against this deen of Islam. But if someone spent 40, 50 years of their life in deen, teaching deen, then you look at that and say, this seems like he's done khidmat for deen, for the Muslims. Then it's a dictate, order of Rasulullah, treat people according to their level. Like parents, you don't treat the parents the same as your friends. I mean, just everybody, that's an instinctive thing. So if you're going to go by equal, everybody's equal and everybody's exactly the same, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says the exact opposite. Anzilun nasa manazilum, treat people according to their levels. Elders have more respect because they are elders. Parents have more respect. Grandparents have more respect, and so forth. So it is most unfortunate that in most things nowadays we swerve from the path of justice and resort to excesses. We go away from justice and fairness. And then he quotes hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Listen, fear of people. So now he talks about haqq, speaking up. Because sometimes Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they disagreed. Many times they disagreed on issues. And even to the question when it was mentioned from a Sahabi about somebody else, because he lied. And not like lying, the ulama have explained this, doesn't mean lie like, no. He felt so strongly about what he's learned from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he said about another person that he lied. Like he's wrong, he's made a mistake, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But it doesn't mean like personally a person is astray or something like that. What he means is that I disagree in very strong terms with what he said. That's how the ulama explain. We have respect for both sides. So, but they're feeling what Rasulullah trained them upon is to speak the truth always. So Rasulullah said, listen, fear of people should never ever prohibit a man of speaking the truth when he knows it. fear of people should never ever prohibit a man from speaking the truth, not personal opinion, the haqq. And one of the Sahaba, Abu Sa'id radiallahu anhu, said, when he heard, he reported this hadith, he started crying. He said, we have seen many things, and the fear of people had prohibited us from speaking. So he regretted that because we couldn't apply. There's certain situations such that, like, the fear was so much that we couldn't speak up. And then Hadhrat Shaykh talks about, he gives quoting another hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, never is a believer one to defame others. This is part of the adab. In political differences, you can't defame people, it's haram. What happens in Muslim countries, and even non-Muslim countries as well, obviously. Neither is a believer one to defame others, neither he to swear to them, nor given to obscene or like filthy language. Rasulullah ﷺ said, swearing to any believer is iniquity. Sibabul Muslim fisq, it's fisq, is sinfulness, and to engage him in battle is kufr, is disbelief. O you people who had accepted Islam by tongue, and into whose heart true faith has not yet reached, do not cause any harm to any Muslims. Neither defame nor embarrass them, nor set after them, searching for their faults, or to expose them to ridicule. For verily whomsoever follows his Muslim brother to expose his faults, Allah shall set about exposing his faults. And when Allah follows anyone in this manner, goes after somebody, then he shall be disgraced, even if he's in complete seclusion in the depth of his house. Allah will humiliate him. Allah save us. So then he gives some advice on unity. One manner in which this may be achieved is that men of understanding should come together and hold extensive talks. Like, if you want to make unit, people of understanding in Sharia, they know the needs of Sharia, they come together, and this difference will disappear. And there was advice given by Haji Imdadullah Muhajir Makki Rahmatullah more than 150 years ago in India. He said, to make sulah, to make peace between people, you need two qualities, and the ulama added the third, which goes without saying. Ikhlas goes without saying. But he said you need ithar and tawadu. Tawadu is humility, to humble yourself to the other party. And the ithar is to prefer others over yourself. These two, when they're there, you can have ittifaq and agreement. But if that's not there, your starting point is this. If you can't be humble towards your Muslim brother because he's Muslim and prefer him over yourself, there's no possibility of any reconciliation or ittifaq or agreement. So then the Shaykh talks about, there's a long section, talks about abusing the friends of Allah, because these were senior ulama, and you have to consider these are saintly, pious, from the great salihin of the recent era. And said, and people went about abusing them and mocking them, and both sides, they were treating, insulting the other side, and the ulama and the elders and seniors of the other side. So this type of attitude is so dangerous, because we actually don't know. I mean, these people confirmed mashayikh and seniors and mujahid and sacrificed everything for Islam. But he said that Madar Haq is one commentary on hadith, on Mishkat. He said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, quoting the hadith, whoever has enmity, adawat, to my friends, I make i'lan of war on them. The hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I declare war on anyone who causes any hurt to any of my friends. There's only two times Allah declares war. And one who consumes interest, riba, and the second one is when they have enmity towards. He's Allah's friend, and someone hates him, doesn't like him. So he said that the author Mazar al-Haq is saying that if Allah declares war, what does it mean? That this person will have a su'a khatima. He'll have a bad ending before he dies. That's one explanation of Allah. He will die in a bad condition, a bad way. Allah save us from and give us husna khatima. So, and then finally, he said that when this ikhtilaf and differences happen, people cross the moral lines. Backbiting, swearing, people engage in all sorts of haram things without realizing they're engaging in haram things. So people often, and then those sins become very light. And he said the reason why Bani Israel killed prophets, Allah explained in the Quran, is because they started going into sins and doing so many sins, and the sins increased in intensity to the point that they brought themselves to killing prophets. Many Anbiya, Allah mentioned repeatedly in the Quran, they killed Anbiya without any haqq, any right to kill. So when sins become light, right, in these political things, whether it be in committees, organizations or associations, when people start crossing the line, the sins actually become light. Backbiting becomes easy, swearing, slander, a lot more worse things happen. When people start doing that, they become unimportant. And they do not understand that each part of deen is so closely connected, interrelated to the rest, that one part supports and relies on the other. Hence Rasulullah ﷺ is reported to have said, when anyone adopts any bid'ah, innovation, Allah removes one sunnah from among them, which never ever returns till the day of Qiyamah. Rasulullah ﷺ also, when Allah decides to destroy any people, He first of all removes from their hearts in all shame, haya. And when they become shameless, you will see them become hateful and disliked in the eyes of the people. When this happens, honesty will disappear from them, and they'll become deceitful till they openly commit acts of dishonesty and deceit. And when they had reached this stage, mercy will be removed from their hearts, and they will not show any mercy to any other creature. When they had reached this stage, they'll become rejected and accursed in the sight of people. And when they had reached this stage, you will see the rope of Islam will fall off their necks. Rasulullah ﷺ said, whoever causes hurt and injury to the heart of any Muslim has hurt me, and whoever hurts me has hurt Allah. Just imagine what a grave warning. If one harms any ordinary Muslim, it is tantamount to having caused hurt to Allah. How much grave is the situation of the unjustly, if the unjustly harmed person who's a true saint, a wali and a friend of Allah. If the average Muslim is, the hadith is like as though he's harming, he's offending Allah. What about someone who's close to Allah? He's a wali of Allah, friend of Allah, and person goes after him. Ulama Sharani Rahmatullah alayhi writes in his book Tabaqat al-Kubra, Imam Abu Turab Rahimahullah, who is one of the mashayikh, said, when a person turns his heart away from Allah, he gets as his companion a habit of criticizing and degrading the saints, the awliya, the wali of Allah. When you turn away from Allah, because they're the friends of Allah, then they start passing the friends of Allah, they start criticizing them. And then finally, two hadiths, also the Shaykh quoted. There's many other things as well, I'm just summarizing it. We can find this book online, it's in English, in Urdu and other languages as well. A Sahabi of Rasulullah ﷺ said, when will Qiyamah come? Rasulullah ﷺ replied, what have you prepared for that day that you're so eager to know of its coming? He replied, I have nothing except that I love Allah and His Rasul ﷺ. He said, you'll be with those who you love. Sayyidina Anas radiallahu anhu said, on hearing this hadith, the Sahaba radiallahu anhu became so filled with joy and pleasure as nothing else would have pleased them. And this hadith is quoted in many other books, that that this report is narrated in many books, and it's advocated that this has been reported numerous times in those sections of the books where love of the friends of Allah is advocated and where warnings are given against friendship with irreligious people. To have love and good condition with Ahlullah is the thing most valuable, which is benefit us in this world and in the hereafter, because you'll be with them. If you love the Ahlullah, the Wali of Allah, the buzu, the pious people, you end up with them. And the top, of course, is they're with Rasulullah ﷺ and Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And the last hadith I wanted to read regarding differences, this is, I'll try to capture the most of this first question. Sayyidina Anas radiallahu anhu reported that Rasulullah ﷺ said to him, advise me, O son, if it is possible for you not to harbor any malice, any hate in your heart against anyone, then do so. This is my path. Whoever loves my path loves me, and whoever follows my path will be my companion in Jannah. For what? To keep the hearts clean. The most difficult thing. The most difficult thing is very hard. But you have to. There's no choice. This is not the choice. One brother came into the masjid, and he, I think it was this hadith or similar type of hadith, and he said, there's one guy I hate so much. And he cried. He was crying in the door. I said, I can't forgive him. What he's done to me and my family is so bad. I said, yeah, but the hadith says you have to. He said, all right. But he's crying. He's like, he was so, because he doesn't want to lose out on the rewards. And we have to be like that. It's hard. Because akhlaq, husnul khuluq is what? A'ti man mana'ak, give to the one with holes. Ahsila man asa, be good to the one that harms you, does bad to you. Be good, give halwa to the one who throws rocks at you. Silman qata'ak, join relation with the one who breaks relation. This is what I think it was one of the ulama, somebody was saying that praying 100 rakat nafil is easy, doing this is hard. That's why the reward, the highest place in Jannah is guaranteed, is for husn khuluq, for this. The person closest to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the day of judgment is because of this. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that. So now this is setting up the case study, which is the partition split in India, Pakistan. The guidelines are being put down on how we protect, when the ikhtilaf happens, how we protect our own akhirah. This is the most important thing is our protect. Despite what happens, I have to make sure I don't cross the shari'i lines of akhlaq, of not insulting, backbiting, all these the basic things in normal circumstances we're not to do, and in politics we're not supposed to do as well. May Allah subhanahu, whether it be in a masjid or a committee or associations, organizations, schools, wherever we work, these lines are the shari'i lines, the sharia lines, these guidelines are there, inshallah. They give us guidance that we're not to cross these lines, regardless of the issue. Regardless of the issue, we're not to cross these shari'i lines. May Allah give us understanding and tawfiq to practice what we're saying here. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallah bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.